The first time I fell in my kitchen, I didn't scream, not 'cause didn't hurt, it hurt everywhere, but because I was afraid of what would happen if someone heard. I lay there on the cold tile floor, staring up at the yellowed ceiling of the house I had lived in 43 years. My right hip burning, my pride burning even more. My phone was only a few feet away on the counter. I could have my daughter, I could have called my son, I could have called anyone. Instead, I whispered to myself, "Get up, Margaret. You're not helpless, not yet." I stayed on that floor for almost an hour before I managed to pull myself up using the edge of the kitchen table. And when I finally stood shaking and out of breath, I made a decision that would quietly shape the next 3 years of my life. I would never tell my children how hard things were becoming, because in my mind, needing help meant becoming a burden. And I had spent my entire life trying to be anything but that. I am 74 years old now. My name is Margaret Wilson. I live alone in a small house in Ohio, the same house where I raised 2 children, celebrated birthdays, cried over report cards, waited for prom nights to end, and stood in the doorway watching them leave for college. This house has seen every version of me. The young mother, the wife, and now, the quiet old woman who talks to her coffee cup in the mornings just to hear a voice. When you're young, you think aging is something that happens to other people. You see your slow down, and you tell yourself, that won't be me. I'll always be strong. I'll always be independent. I believed that too. I worked for 32 years as a school secretary. I never missed a day unless I had the flu or a funeral. I raised my children mostly on my own after my husband passed away when they were teenagers. I paid bills. I fixed broken sinks. I learned how to change a tire because no one else was there to do it. So when my body started betraying me in my late 60s, the stiff knees, the shortness of breath, the dizziness, I didn't see it as aging. I saw it weakness. And weakness was something I had no patience for, especially in myself. My daughter Emily lives 3 hours away. She has her own family, 2 teenagers, a demanding job. My son, David, is in another state, busy building a career, chasing promotions, trying to be the man I raised him to be. They call me. They check on me. They tell me, "Mom, if you need anything, just ask." But asking, not as easy as people think. Because asking means admitting you can't do it alone anymore. And I had built my entire identity on doing things alone. Started small things. I stopped driving at night because my eyes weren't as sharp. I didn't tell anyone. I just made excuses. Don't going out. Be another day. Then I stopped going to the grocery store as often. Carrying heavy bags made my back ache for days, so I bought less food, lived on soup, toast, and cereal. I lost weight, and I looked good. They didn't know I wasn't eating well. They just saw a thinner version of me and smiled. I let the house slip too. Dust collected, laundry piled up. I used to be the woman whose floors shined and whose windows sparkled. Now I closed the curtains more often so no one would see inside. Pride is a strange thing. Doesn't shout, it whispers. Tells you you don't need help. It tells you if you ask you'll look weak. It tells you they'll think you're a burden. So you keep struggling in silence. One afternoon, my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, knocked on my door. "I haven't seen you outside in a while," she said. "Are you feeling all right?" I smiled and said, "Oh, I'm fine. Just enjoying being home." The truth was, I was afraid to fall again. After that first fall in the kitchen, there were 2 more. Once in the bathroom, once in the backyard while trying to water my flowers. Each time I got up alone. Each time I told no one. Because once you tell, things change. Once you tell, people start worrying. Once you tell, start watching. Once you tell, they start talking about things like moving closer or assisted living, or maybe it's time. And I wasn't ready to be talked about like a problem that needed solving. I wasn't ready to stop being the mother and start being the one who needed mothering. I remember one phone call with Emily that almost broke me. She said, "Mom, you sound tired lately. Are you okay?" I looked around my quiet living room, at the empty chair where her father used to sit, at the ticking clock that seemed louder than usual, at my hands that had begun to tremble, just slightly. And I said, "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just getting old, I guess." She laughed softly. Well, we all are, but I wasn't laughing. I was terrified. Terrified that one day, I wouldn't be able to hide it anymore. The hardest part of aging isn't the pain. It's invisible. People stop asking your opinion. They stop expecting from you. They start talking louder, like you're already halfway gone, and you start wondering, is this what I've become? a fragile thing people tiptoe around. I didn't want that. I chose silence instead. One winter evening, the power went out during a storm. Snow was falling hard. My house grew colder by the hour. I wrapped myself in blankets and sat in the dark, listening to the wind slam against the windows. I could have called David. I could have Emily. But instead, I sat there shivering, telling myself, "You'll manage, you always do." By morning, I was sick. It took me weeks to recover. 2 weeks of calling in my house, shaking hands, forcing myself to eat because I knew I had to. And still, I told no one. You think pride looks like confidence. Sometimes it looks like loneliness. The day everything finally changed didn't come with drama. No ambulance, no big fall, no hospital lights. It came quietly, the way most real turning points do. I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying a jar of peanut butter. My hands wouldn't do it. I twisted and twisted until my wrists hurt. And then, without warning, I started crying. Not tears, not tears. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep you didn't even know it existed. I cried because I couldn't open a jar. I cried because my husband wasn't there to help. I cried because my children were far away. I cried because I was tired of being strong. I cried because I was ashamed of needing help. And in that moment, sitting alone in my quiet kitchen, I finally admitted something I had been refusing to say for years. I wasn't of getting old. I was afraid of becoming a burden. I don't know what finally broke the silence I had built so carefully around my life. Maybe it was the way my hands trembled that morning when I tried to pour coffee and spilled half of it on the counter. Maybe it was the ache in my knees that wouldn't go away anymore. Or maybe it was just the simple truth that pretending was getting harder than admitting. It happened on Tuesday. Emily showed up at my door without warning. I was standing in the kitchen, still in my robe, hair uncombed, when the knock came. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Nobody ever came by without calling first. When I opened the door and saw her standing there, my daughter, my little girl who used to sleep with a teddy bear and now stood in front of me with worry written all over her face. My first instinct was not happiness. It was panic. "Mom," she said softly, "why didn't you tell me?" Tell you what? She looked past me into the house. The dust, the unwashed dishes, the laundry basket I hadn't touched in days. She didn't need words anymore. "I talked to Mrs. Jenkins," she said. "She told me you've fallen more than once." I felt close. "That was nothing," I said quickly. "Just clumsy moments." Emily stepped closer. "Mom, you were on the floor for an hour." I turned away because I couldn't stand the look in her eyes. Not anger, not disappointment. That worse. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I once helped her with homework, where I once scolded her for not eating her vegetables. Now she sat across from me like a worried parent. "Why didn't you call me?" she asked. I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. Because how do you explain to your child that you didn't want to become a burden? How do you tell them you were afraid they would see you as weak? "I didn't want to trouble you," I finally whispered. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, you're not trouble. You're my mother." That sentence broke something inside me. That evening, she called my son. He arrived 2 days later. Seeing both my children in my small living room at the same time felt strange, like time folding in on itself. For a moment, I saw them as they used to be, sitting on the floor with toys, arguing over who got the last cookie. Now they sat across from me, serious, gentle, united. "Mom," David said carefully, "we love you, but you can't keep doing this alone." I crossed my arms. "I've done everything alone my whole life. And you've beautifully," Emily said. "But you don't have to prove anything anymore." They talked about home care visits, moving closer, maybe even staying with one of them for a while. Every word felt like a small loss. Loss, independence, loss of pride, loss of I used to be. "I'm not helpless," I said sharply. "No," David replied gently. "You're human." That was the moment I realized how tired I was of fighting reality. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. Letting someone help you after a lifetime of helping others feels like learning to walk again. Awkward, uncomfortable, humiliating at first. A nurse started coming twice a week. Emily arranged for groceries to be delivered. David installed grab bars in the bathroom. Every change felt like a reminder that I was not who I used to be. And yet, slowly, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter, not in my body, in my heart. For the first time in years, I slept without fear of falling and being alone on the floor. For the first time, I ate real meals again. For the first time, I laughed without forcing it. One afternoon, as Emily helped me fold laundry, I said quietly, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you." She hugged me then, really hugged me, the way she used to when she was a child afraid of thunderstorms. "Mom," she whispered, "you spent your life carrying us. Let us you a little now." I cried in her arms, not from sadness, from relief. I had always believed asking for help meant losing dignity. I was wrong. Dignity isn't in doing everything alone. Dignity is in trusting love enough to receive it. A few months later, I was sitting on my porch one quiet evening, watching the sun behind the trees, when I realized something that surprised me. I was no longer afraid, not of falling, not of needing help, not even of growing old. I wasn't alone anymore. Emily called me every morning now. David visited every weekend. And for the first time in years, my house didn't feel like a place I was surviving in. It felt like a home again. One afternoon, my granddaughter climbed into my lap and said, "Grandma, I like it when you let us help you." I smiled, but inside something deeper happened. I finally understood that asking for help had never made me weak. It had made my children feel needed. It had given them the chance to love me the way I once loved them. Now when I tell my story, I don't say I was ashamed anymore. I say I was brave, not because I carried everything alone, but because I finally had the courage to put my pride down and my heart in my children's hands. And in doing that, I didn't lose my dignity. I found a new kind of strength, this to be loved,